A Russian military convoy was moving near Novohordivka on the Pokrovsk front, carrying BMP infantry fighting vehicles, trucks, and other transport vehicles toward one of the most dangerous sectors of the war. There was no artillery barrage waiting ahead. No minefield had stopped the road. The convoy was still moving, but above it, Ukrainian drones were already watching. One vehicle became a target, then another. The attacks began while the formation was still on the move, forcing Russian crews to keep driving while trying to understand where the next drone might come from. That is where the real danger began. A convoy is built to move as one system, but when several vehicles are threatened at different points, speed, spacing, and coordination can collapse in seconds. A road that looks like a supply route can suddenly become part of the battlefield itself. What happened near Novohordivka shows how deeply drones are changing movement behind the front line on the Pokrovsk axis. Stay with Military Force as we break down how this attack unfolded, why this convoy became vulnerable, and what it tells us about the next stage of the drone war. The strike near Novohordivka was carried out by drone operators from the 13th Legion Omega, a relatively new Ukrainian unit already fighting on one of the hardest parts of the Pokrovsk front. 13th Legion belongs to the Special Purpose Center Omega of Ukraine's National Guard, and according to Omega's official information, the formation was created in March 2026. Its deployment toward Pokrovsk was important because this sector has become a testing ground for modern drone warfare, where control of the air just above the battlefield can decide whether vehicles move, supplies arrive, or infantry can hold their positions. That makes the 13th Legion more than another FPV team operating close to the front. Its mission is much broader than sending explosive drones toward Russian armor. The unit is built to operate across several parts of the unmanned fight at the same time. Its tasks include aerial reconnaissance, counter-drone operations, electronic warfare, and the detection of Russian surveillance and attack UAVs. It also works to protect Ukrainian troops from hostile aircraft flying at low altitude. In practical terms, this means the same formation can search for enemy movement, defend its own airspace, identify hostile drones, and support strike missions against targets on the ground. That wider mission gives the unit something a small, independent FPV group may not have: a more complete picture of what is happening around the target area. That distinction matters because modern drone attacks rarely begin when the strike aircraft starts its final dive. The real process often begins much earlier, when another sensor finds movement and keeps watching long enough to understand what the target is doing. Reconnaissance operators can study a road, identify vehicle types, follow direction of travel, and decide which machines may be more valuable than others. Strike pilots can then enter the area with a much clearer idea of where to search. At the same time, counter-UAV teams and electronic warfare crews can reduce the risk from Russian drones attempting to locate Ukrainian operators or interfere with their mission. The attack therefore becomes a chain of connected actions rather than a single pilot reacting to something on a screen. This is also why the Novohordivka operation should not be described as cooperation between the 13th Legion and a separate counter-drone formation unless stronger evidence confirms that structure. Omega's own description shows that the 13th Legion itself was created with counter-unmanned operations as part of its mission. That point may sound technical, but it changes how the attack should be understood. Ukraine is no longer treating reconnaissance drones, FPV aircraft, electronic warfare, and counter-UAV teams as completely separate tools. They are increasingly being organized so each capability supports another. And that is a major step in how drone warfare is becoming part of regular military structure. For years, FPV warfare was often associated with small volunteer groups, improvised equipment, and individual pilots who developed their own methods at the front. That model has not disappeared, but units such as the 13th Legion show how the system is becoming more organized. The operator who carries out the final strike may be only the most visible part of the process. Behind that pilot can be reconnaissance crews searching for movement, specialists watching enemy frequencies, teams hunting Russian UAVs, and ground units waiting for the result. The drone itself may still be cheap and small, but the network supporting it is becoming more complex, and that can make each aircraft far more useful than its price would suggest. This development is especially important on the Pokrovsk axis because both sides are fighting over movement as much as territory. Troops need ammunition, fuel, replacement vehicles, communications equipment, and fresh personnel, and all of those resources must travel through areas increasingly watched from the air. A unit capable of combining reconnaissance, attack, electronic warfare, and counter-drone work can therefore affect much more than a single vehicle. It can make the movement of an entire force slower, more cautious, and more expensive. 13th Legion created the conditions for such pressure near Novorodivka, but its capabilities only opened the door. The way the Russian vehicles were moving would determine how large that opportunity became. The Russian formation near Novorodivka included BMP infantry fighting vehicles, cars, transport trucks, and other support vehicles moving along the same road. That concentration gave Ukrainian drones something more valuable than a single target. It gave them a pattern. Once one part of the column was found, operators could follow the road and watch how the rest of the vehicles were moving through the area. Instead of searching a large battlefield for separate machines, the surveillance effort could focus on one moving line. Every vehicle that remained inside that line added another possible target, and every minute of observation gave the operators a clearer picture of the formation. Moving in a convoy is not automatically a tactical mistake. Vehicles can stay under common command, crews can support each other, and supplies can arrive at roughly the same time. If one truck develops a mechanical problem, another vehicle may be nearby to help. Security is also easier to organize when personnel and equipment are not scattered across many roads. But the same structure creates a different problem when drones are watching from above. What helps commanders control the group on the ground can make its movement easier to recognize from the air, and that trade-off has become much more serious in Ukraine. A reconnaissance drone does not need to identify every vehicle at once. It can first detect movement, then remain over the area long enough to understand what is happening. A BMP has a different shape from a truck. A larger transport vehicle may move differently from a passenger car. Support machines may also appear at particular places inside the formation. These details help operators build a picture of the convoy before choosing what to attack. The process is simple in principle. Find the movement, maintain contact, identify useful targets, and then bring strike drones toward them. The difficult part is keeping that chain alive while the vehicles continue moving. Roads make that task easier because they limit the number of possible directions. A vehicle traveling across open terrain can turn, separate from the group, or disappear behind natural cover. A column using a known route has fewer choices. Even if the drone temporarily loses sight of one truck, the operator may still know where the road leads and where the vehicle is likely to appear again. A bend, an intersection, a tree line, or a damaged section of pavement can become a useful reference point. In that sense, the road itself helps create the track, and the convoy supplies the movement that keeps the track alive. Novorodivka is also important because Russian vehicle activity in this area did not begin with this attack. In January 2026, Ukraine's 7th Rapid Response Corps said Russian forces were concentrating heavy equipment around Novorodivka to support operations near Mirnohrad. That earlier report does not prove that the vehicles seen in this strike belong to the same force, and the two events should not be treated as one operation. But it does show why this area matters. Novorodivka has been connected to the movement and concentration of Russian equipment on the wider Pokrovsk axis, which makes roads around it important for both logistics and combat mobility. That creates a difficult balance for Russian forces. Spreading vehicles farther apart can make them harder to attack as one group, but it can also weaken control and slow movement. Sending them in smaller groups may reduce the value of each strike, yet it can increase the time needed to move the same amount of equipment. Using the same road is faster and easier to organize, but repeated movement can give Ukrainian surveillance crews more chances to study the route. There is no perfect answer, because every choice changes one risk while creating another. For the Ukrainian operators, however, finding the convoy was only the first part of the problem. Observation created the opportunity, but the result would depend on how the strike drones were used once several vehicles were available at the same time. The important decision was not simply whether to attack, but where inside the formation to apply pressure. The Ukrainian drones began attacking while the Russian convoy was still moving, and that changed the problem from protecting individual vehicles to keeping the entire formation under control. Several machines were struck at different points along the column. Once that happened, movement became harder to manage. A driver near the front could accelerate to escape the danger, while another farther back might slow down after seeing smoke or a damaged vehicle ahead. The convoy no longer moved at one steady pace. Gaps started to open in some places and shrink in others, and that loss of rhythm created new problems before the next drone even arrived. The first hit is often important because it forces every crew behind it to make a decision. A vehicle can stop, move around the obstacle, increase speed, or continue along the same path. None of those choices is free. Stopping makes the machine easier to watch and gives another UAV more time to approach. Moving off the road can reduce speed and may place a heavy vehicle on soft ground where mobility becomes worse. Accelerating can separate one section from the rest of the group. Continuing forward keeps the formation together, but it can also send more vehicles through the same area where the attack has already begun. One strike can therefore create several different reactions at once. This is where concentration becomes dangerous. Having many vehicles on one route does not mean Ukrainian drones will automatically destroy them. Russian forces still have several ways to reduce the threat. Electronic warfare can disrupt control links. Small arms and dedicated counter-drone weapons can attack low-flying UAVs. Crews can spread out, use camouflage, reduce movement during clear daylight, or take advantage of fog and poor weather. These measures matter, and they can make an attack much harder. But once several drones reach the same road at roughly the same time, the defenders are no longer solving only an air defense problem. They are also trying to prevent traffic from turning into confusion. That reaction cascade can be more important than the damage to one BMP or truck. Imagine the lead vehicle slows sharply after an explosion. The second machine moves left to avoid it. A transport truck behind them brakes, while another driver tries to pass before the road becomes blocked. Even if every vehicle remains operational, the formation has already lost part of its original structure. Commanders must restore spacing, keep communications working, and decide whether to push forward or leave the area. These decisions take time, and time is exactly what drone crews need to find another target. The battle begins to shift from destruction toward loss of tempo. An FPV does not have to destroy an entire convoy to create that effect. It only has to make different drivers choose different responses. That is the deeper tactical value of hitting several points instead of sending every available aircraft toward one armored vehicle. A single spectacular kill may look more dramatic, but several smaller attacks can place pressure on a much larger system. One damaged machine becomes an obstacle. Another strike can force a change in direction. A third may slow the rear of the column while the front keeps moving. The result is a formation that becomes harder to command even before the full level of physical damage is known. This also explains why keeping vehicles close enough to support each other can become a weakness under constant aerial observation. The same road that makes coordination easier also keeps several possible targets inside a limited area. Once Ukrainian operators know where the column is moving, they do not need to search a wide section of the battlefield again for every strike. They can continue working around the same route, watch how Russian crews react, and choose another vehicle when an opening appears. The pressure is therefore not only against armor, it is against movement itself. That is the larger lesson from the attack near Novohrodivka. Modern drone warfare is making it harder for mechanized forces to treat the space behind the front as a safe zone for organized movement. A road can still carry troops, fuel, ammunition, and vehicles quickly, but every concentrated movement creates a pattern that may be seen and attacked. That pressure helps explain why Ukrainian drone units are increasingly looking beyond the immediate line of contact and deeper into the routes that keep Russian forces supplied. The strike near Novohordivka reflects a wider change in Ukrainian drone operations. UAV teams are no longer waiting for Russian vehicles to reach the immediate front before attacking them. Earlier in the war, FPV drones were mostly associated with tanks near trenches, armored vehicles during assaults, or infantry moving through exposed positions. That picture is now much broader. Trucks, transport vehicles, storage sites, drone control points, supply routes, and equipment moving between assembly areas and combat positions are increasingly part of the target list. The battlefield is expanding backward, and the roads that connect Russian units to the front are becoming part of the fight. This shift matters because every military position depends on a constant flow of supplies. Ammunition has to reach artillery units. Fuel must arrive for armored vehicles. Replacement parts are needed to keep damaged equipment running, while food, batteries, communications gear, and fresh personnel must move forward every day. None of these resources matter if they cannot reach the forces that need them. By attacking vehicles during that journey, Ukraine can create pressure before those supplies enter direct combat. The goal is not always to destroy every truck. Even repeated delays can force commanders to change routes, schedules, escorts, and the size of transport groups. The pattern around Pokrovsk has already appeared in several separate incidents. On May 4th, Ukrainian forces reported striking a Russian drone control point near Novohordivka, which the Institute for the Study of War assessed at roughly 15 kilometers from the front at that time. During June, Ukrainian forces also reported attacks on drone launch sites and logistical targets across the wider Pokrovsk sector. Then, on July the 23rd, Ukrainian units said they struck 2 Russian trucks near Selidov and along the M30 Selidov to Pokrovsk Road. These were separate actions, and they should not be presented as one campaign. Together, however, they show that support systems behind the main fighting line are receiving more attention. For an American military audience, the closest familiar concept is interdiction. The purpose is to attack the enemy's ability to move forces and supplies before they can influence the main battle. Traditionally, this job could involve artillery, attack helicopters, tactical aircraft, or precision-guided missiles. Drones are now taking over part of that mission at a much smaller scale. An FPV cannot replace a fighter aircraft or a long-range missile, and it does not have the same destructive power. But it can reach a truck, a communications vehicle, a drone crew, or another exposed target without using a weapon that costs far more. That cost difference changes what commanders can afford to attack. A precision missile is usually reserved for a target valuable enough to justify the expense. A small UAV can be used against a much wider range of vehicles, especially when operators already know where those machines are moving. Medium-range drones extend that pressure farther from the trenches, while reconnaissance aircraft help identify activity before a strike platform arrives. The result is not complete control of the rear area. It is something more gradual. More roads become dangerous, more movements require protection, and more resources must be spent simply to keep traffic flowing. Russia can still adapt. Convoys can move at night, use smaller groups, change routes, add electronic warfare, increase air defense, or exploit bad weather. Yet every adaptation carries a cost. Smaller formations move less cargo at once. Longer routes consume more fuel. Extra protection takes equipment away from other missions. Delayed travel can slow the arrival of ammunition or reinforcements. The effect is therefore cumulative. A single drone strike may appear limited, but repeated pressure can make an entire supply network less efficient. That is why the mission of a unit such as the 13th Legion cannot be reduced to launching so-called kamikaze drones. Once the fight moves deeper into the support network, success depends on finding targets, protecting friendly UAVs, contesting enemy systems, and connecting several unmanned roles into one operating picture. 13th Legion's work on the Pokrovsk axis shows that drone warfare is moving beyond small groups of pilots operating almost alone. The unit combines several tasks inside the same combat system, and each one supports the others. Aerial reconnaissance searches for vehicles and follows their movement. Strike UAVs attack confirmed targets. Counter UAS teams look for Russian drones. Electronic warfare tries to reduce the enemy's ability to observe or attack, while other elements help protect Ukrainian troops from threats in the air. The important point is not the number of drones involved. It is how these different roles can be connected. That chain can begin with a reconnaissance aircraft finding movement on a road. Once the target is identified, the information can be passed to a strike team that knows where to search and what kind of vehicle it is looking for. At the same time, counter-drone crews can watch for Russian reconnaissance aircraft that may threaten the mission. Electronic warfare can add another layer by making enemy UAV operations more difficult. Ground units then gain an advantage if Russian vehicles are delayed, forced away from a route, or prevented from reaching the area on time. The final FPV strike may last only a few seconds, but the process behind it can involve several separate systems. This is what turns a collection of small aircraft into a kill chain. Each platform may have a limited job. A surveillance UAV may carry no explosive charge. A jammer may never see the target directly. A counter UAS team may spend the entire mission protecting the airspace instead of attacking anything on the ground. But when these parts work together, the result becomes much more powerful than any single drone. The value comes from connection. One system finds, another protects, another disrupts, and another delivers the strike. That is a much more mature form of unmanned warfare than simply launching an FPV after spotting a vehicle by chance. It also changes what commanders must protect. Russian forces are not only trying to stop the aircraft approaching a truck or BMP. They must think about the reconnaissance platform that found the target, the operator controlling the strike, the electronic system supporting the mission, and the counter-drone element protecting the Ukrainian side. Defeating one part of that chain may not be enough if another system can continue the task. This creates a contest between networks, not just between individual machines, and Pokrovsk has become one of the clearest places where that contest can be seen. That matters because the Pokrovsk sector remains one of the most heavily contested areas of the front. In such an environment, the loss of one truck is not automatically decisive, and a single drone attack cannot be described as cutting Russian logistics across the entire sector. The evidence does not support a claim that large. The more realistic effect is steady pressure. Every movement may require more spacing, more protection, more planning, and more time. A route that was used yesterday may need to be changed tomorrow, while another transport mission may have to wait for better weather or stronger cover. That is where the larger impact begins to appear. When the same pressure is repeated across many missions, logistics must adapt to survive. More effort goes into protecting movement, while less freedom remains to move quickly and predictably. The Novorodivka strike shows that the danger zone around Pokrovsk is no longer limited to trenches and assault positions. Once vehicles are detected from the air, even routine movement can become a combat problem, forcing commanders to spend more time and resources just to keep traffic moving. That may be the most important lesson. Drones are not only destroying equipment, they are changing where military forces can move safely and how quickly support can reach the front. The line between the battlefield and the tactical rear is becoming harder to see. Subscribe to Military Force for more clear analysis of the weapons, tactics, and decisions shaping modern warfare.